0, 1.
Let's get started.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to this week's episode of Texas Narcos Podcast. Today, I'm very excited to have a special guest, Chief Matt Walls from the Austin County Sheriff's Office here with me. Matt, thanks for coming on the show.
I appreciate you having me.
All right, man. So before we get started, everybody that comes on the show gets a gift. So we got you a Texas Narcos t-shirt here.
Thank you very much, man. That's awesome.
Yes, sir. So, all right. So we'll jump right in. So currently you are the Chief Deputy of the Austin County SO. Won't you tell us a little bit about your background, where you came from, how'd you get to this position, that kind of stuff?
Okay. As you said, it's the current Chief Deputy I recently promoted at the Austin County Sheriff's Office, the position I'm in. I grew up here in Belleville, Texas, originally from Houston. Family moved out here when I was about 8, 9 years old and grew up here. Went to high school here, graduated. After high school, I ended up I come from a family of law enforcement. My dad was a police officer. I have a brother that's a police officer. I have one brother that's a Houston fireman. So it's kind of just in my DNA, I guess you could say. So I went to the University of Houston Police Academy, graduated in 2002, and started here that same year.
Cool. All right. So you've been here at the same agency your whole career?
Nope. I left, tried another agency for a little bit. Wasn't kind of my thing. Work patrol.
Gotcha.
Ended up coming back and been back in this county ever since for the last, I don't know. I've been on 22 years. So I've basically been back 20 years.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So what year or when did you get into working narcotics specifically?
So how it worked for me is I always knew. I mean, some guys, they come out and they really dig patrol and that's their jam. They want to work that, majority of their career. I knew I liked patrol, worked night shift, but I always kind of knew that I wanted to try to work narcotics. I was lucky enough so I did about 4 years on patrol. Towards the end of that, I was pretty lucky that I just had a chance encounter where I got assigned to a local task force for the day that was out. They were literally just doing nothing really. They were trying to do some buy bus and some other things, just work in the area. And I'll never forget, man, they said, hey, probably because I was young and thin and could run fast. And they're like, hey, we'll use this dude. So I met them and I was like, dang, that's what I want to do right there. And we didn't even accomplish anything for the day. We tried to do a couple buy bus. It didn't even work, but I was kind of bitten after that. So 06-ish,
Okay.
I got into working narcotics, worked street level anything. Way it worked here is I was really the only guy, one of two in this several county area that task force I had spoke about got disbanded. It was one of the old DPS task forces. So it was just me for a couple counties. And so there's another guy, Randy Tooman, who I grew up with, who's a big interdiction officer at the time. He was getting into working plainclothes narcotics too. So we helped each other out. He worked at a neighboring county and it was just kind of me and him. And so we worked everything.
Right.
So.
All right. So during your time in the narcotics area, have you worked on just the local task force? Have you worked anything on the higher level as far as like the federal side?
Yep.
Or
so kind of my path was I did about 4 years here working, as I say street level, man. Back in those days, it's really, for me primarily, meth really hadn't blown up yet. It was still, meth cooks and stuff like that.
right.
Primarily it was crack. I tell everybody I made a living off buying crack every day, man. I loved it. We did that for about 4 years, had the opportunity to work with a federal task force on some joint operations. And through that, we, as an agency, explored the idea of becoming a HIDTA county and joining a HIDTA task force. And how that worked for me is I became was lucky enough, number one, to get the chance. I became a TFO, got sent to task force officer, got deputized through DEA, and I was assigned to a major drug squad in Houston,
Okay.
and I was there for roughly 10 years.
All right. All right. So you do all that during that time. Have you done anything? No, you talked about you did some undercover work. Did you primarily do the undercover type work, or did you also do like the interdiction type stuff, or what was kind of your
No, I was never a good interdiction guy.
Okay.
Yeah, that was not my gig.
Right.
I would ride with Randy a lot, and yeah, he's the man for that. So no, I was always a plainclothes narc. Yeah, I did UC. So just in the first 4 years out here, working these several counties that surround us, um, I got the chance to do undercover. When I got to be assigned to DEA, that task force, just to say it plainly, unless you speak Spanish and are Hispanic at that
Exactly.
level, you're not working undercover.
Right. Yeah.
So
Exactly.
yeah, we that kind of ended that for me. But no, I always enjoyed it. I think that if you're going to work narcotics, it's super important to work undercover.
Right.
You need that experience, and it would be a mixture. Sometimes out here, because I did work patrol in the area, there was sometimes you couldn't. Obviously everybody knows everybody, and it's a different animal if you're going to work in rural counties working narcotics. Versus in Houston or somewhere like that. So you got to be a little bit more trickier, but yeah, a lot of CI driven,
Right.
you know.
Yeah, I can tell you that's definitely true because the county I work in, that the town that's in the county I work in, I grew up in
Yeah.
from high school, or actually from kindergarten all the way up, and I also have done a ton of undercover in that county. And it's
Yeah.
weird. People are like, how do you do undercover in the same town you grew up in? It's like, well, you just gotta, you know, you gotta change the way you look, you gotta change the way you act, and
Yeah.
you know,
But
so
I don't think people realize too. I mean, like for us, and I'm sure y'all's proximity to, I know where you're from, y'all's proximity to big town. I mean, our county as a whole, you get on Interstate 10, you're literally 15, 20 minutes from Houston. I don't think people literally, or from Harris County, I should say, but I don't think people really know how many people come through here. It's just, yeah, you grow up with some people, but typically, sometimes not. Typically, you're not buying dope from the dudes you grew up with. It does happen.
right,
But there's so many, when you get into the dope game and you're working an area, you know how it is. It's like all these people pop up that you had no idea they were there, no idea that, that you had that many, I'll say, sources of supply or
right,
dealers, whatever you want to say. It's kind of surprising. And yeah, no, I would, always kind of start out with get a CI to maybe drive you up to the house, sit in the
right.
car, kind of
Introduction.
test it, little intro, and then, work it up to the point where you can be the dude, doing the actual hand to hand.
Right.
That's the fun part for me.
Yeah. It was there was one time there was a guy, when I very first started, I worked in a jail, and there was a guy, I ran the crew that did the floors and the laundry,
Mm-hmm.
and there was a guy that was on my crew, and so that was probably 2000, early '07, and then fast forward probably 2017, 2018, I'm working narcotics, and just it was an off the cuff type thing. It wasn't a planned operation. It was a thing where I had some cash on me. We were going to do another buy, but it didn't work out. And we pulled up, and there was a house where I saw a guy on the front porch, and this was a known crack house. And so I pulled up. He comes out to the car, asked me, what I need. Turns out it was one of the guys that was on my work crew. I'm like, oh man, I'm done. He's not going to sell to me. And I showed him the $20, and he's like, all right, I got you. And so he goes inside, gets the crack, comes back in the car, gets in the passenger seat, and he wants he wants me to break him off some,
Yeah.
and he wants to smoke with me. I'm like, no, dude, this is mine. Like, he says, I'm gonna party this weekend. No, this is mine. You got to get out of here. So, anyways, he gets out of the car. We come back a couple of days later with a warrant, and he's like, hey, man. And I'm like, you don't remember me? And he's like, oh, I do now. Yeah, my bad. I was like, oh, come on. So, criminals are not always the smartest people around. So,
No, they are not. But yeah, you do run into that. And I think that's kind of, I tell everybody that gets in law enforcement, and narcotics isn't for everybody. I had 18 good years of it. Um, it isn't for everybody, but for the people that get into it and like it, man, it's the best job in the world.
oh, yeah.
Like I'll tell you, from street level, and then, majority of my time at MDS when I was assigned there, we did some things that just you just dream about doing. You
Right.
check some boxes that you're just like, oh my gosh, man. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, it's I would have done it for free. So
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I've been on the narcotics unit for 8 years now, and been a detective for 10. And I tell everybody, in my current assignment, I said I've got 10 years till I can retire, and I don't plan on doing anything else.
yeah,
So, but
yeah. I never I used to tell everybody when I got assigned to DEA, there were some task force officers there that you met that had been there for 25
right,
years. And I was like, man, I'm gonna be one of those guys. And the only thing that got me to leave was a chance for we started our own HIDA, our own task force sponsored by DEA and by HIDA, and that gave me an opportunity. I got to promote and and jump into that, but that's really the only reason why I left.
right,
I still miss it. I miss it every day. So.
yeah. Well, cool. Let's jump into your time as a SWAT operator. Um,
Yeah, so that's kind of we're really proud of that at our agency and the agencies that participate. So the way that came about is we when I first started working narcotics, like I said, we kind of built it from the ground up at our agency. Uh, we started generating warrants, and with when you work narcotics, it's search warrants are going to come, arrest warrants are going to come, and we had no warrant team, we had nothing like that, and so we started reaching out to, hey, who can come assist to run these warrants? If we got some houses with fortified doors and all that kind of stuff. And we reached back then, DPS did not have the regional SRTs. It was just SWAT in Austin. So we reached out, and I think they were like, hey, the good dudes, but they're like, man, we're swamped. Maybe like 2 weeks from now, we can get down there and run it. And to the sheriff at the time, he said, that just doesn't work for me. He says he had retired from HPD. He was a narc. He knows how it goes, and he's like, we need to start something here. So it really started out from the ground up. Wrote the proposal. This is in like maybe '08, I want to say, um, as just a warrant team,
right,
just an old school, just raid team, whatever you want to call it. And that has evolved over the years into we run a regional SRT team that covers 4 counties. Um, all our guys, majority of all our guys, we send them through TTPOA. Usually it's the Houston SWAT school. We house them. So we have a narcotics office, task force office here. Like I mentioned earlier, we run a 4 county HIDA task force, super busy for the area. And kind of was my dream is like, hey man, we have this offsite location. How about we house SRT in there as well? So when a narc is working up a target package, hey, I'm buying from this guy. I know this is going to lead to a search warrant. He can just go to the SWAT dude and be like, hey man, here you go.
that's
And
awesome.
yeah, it's been great. We kind of have a little compound up on the hill, man, with a shop and place to keep all our vehicles and trucks and this and that. And it has evolved into, you know, we got your H&T, you got all your support guys, you got your drone pilots, you got your explosive breachers. It has really, really, it's something I'm super proud of. And still today, that was my only thing when I promoted chief deputy, is I told the sheriff, I said, man, I know I'm going to lose narcotics, but you gotta leave me something. So I stayed commander over that. But we got a bunch of young dudes, and it's a real solid team. And they actually, it's a collateral duty for most of them. We do
Okay.
have a full-time sergeant that runs it, and I would say one or two other guys that really have turned into full-time gig. But um, I think we're running like 30 missions a year
Oh,
probably.
wow. That's a
So
lot.
that's a lot for a collateral team. So, but they love it, man. It's been great. So,
And your operators that are on that team, are they just from your agency, or are they from other agencies around the area?
no, so it's regional. So it started out originally that we pulled from just agencies within our county, and then we expanded. But we don't have Fayette County as part of it. Um, uh, Colorado County came on board. And then most everybody else is from. We have some one of our H&T guys, support guys, are from Waller County. I mean, every agency tries to pitch in, but the flip side of that is we have a standard for every role. If it's a support guy, obviously it's an operator. We have H&T program. You got to meet the standard.
Right.
That's one thing we're proud of, man. This ain't a popularity contests. Oh, just because you want to do it, you get to do it. No, you're going to meet the standards that are set, and that's the only way that you can truly run something like that. So,
That's awesome. I think it's pretty important, especially in today's day and age, to have a good working relationship between your narc unit and your tactical um, guys as well, because there's there's a lot of times where there's a disconnect there, and the SRT guys or the SWAT guys are always asking for work, and then you bring them work, and it's like, well, this is going to take us 2 days to plan. This is going to take us this, or however it is. But to have that cohesiveness between the two units, I think is really awesome.
it works really well. It's kind of like that was kind of my baby, man. I dreamed that up when I came back because we were starting fresh with this new task force. Got to pick all the TFOs, and I said, man, what would be great is if we could co-house everybody, and it's worked. I mean, it's worked great. Our SRT guys are on the group thread for narcotics, so they can see. I mean, hey, we're probably gonna, narcs will throw it out there. Hey, this is my third buy, whatever. Hey, it's working towards search warrant probably next week. The SRT guys, hey, I'll knock out that target package and brief, and it's been running pretty seamlessly between the two. I got a young dude who's a really good operator that we just recently in the last year assigned to Gulf Coast to the U.S. Marshal Task Force.
Okay.
So that even helps us even more,
Yeah.
and we're not about, if it's something that we can, we get bogged down and it's like, hey man, we'll take one location, can Gulf Coast take another? Or we DPS Region 2, DPS SRT, we work with them a lot. They've been great. Um, we know what we can do and what we can't do.
Right.
And if we're bogged down or we know that we need help, man, it's been great. Everybody's HPD SWAT's been great. People step up and help all the time. So.
That's awesome. There's agencies out there that kind of try to have gotten away from the task forces over the years because back in the day when the DPS task forces were around, there was a lot of stuff that happened and people kind of got away from it. But I'm a big proponent of the task force, idea, because especially if you're in a rural area, you're a small department and you've got 2 guys on narcs or 3 guys on narcs. If you can get onto part of a task force, you just turn your 2 guys into 10 guys or 12 guys, however many it is. It's invaluable resource to have that.
I've used that in so many meetings when we were started out to justify a lot of this stuff. And I'll also say this, man, if you pick the right TFOs and you got workers, to me, you got an office full of problem solvers. Like that's to me, and now being in the position I am, you reach out, you got a problem, you need problem solvers. And that's the way I look at SRT. That's the way I look at the task force. You got so many different guys from so many different agencies. Well, you combine all those people and who they know
Right.
and their contacts. I saw it every day at the task force in Houston, where I was at. I was primarily, the squad I was attached to was primarily an HPD squad. So I had a lot of HPD guys in there. But, if you needed something and it was like, hey, we're about to travel to New York tomorrow, you just walk down the hall and somebody's going to know somebody and be like, hey, I got the contact for you. Call this guy. They'll be waiting on you. And it just works. For me, we've always leaned into that heavily into the task forces, and we have a great agency that has supported it. We're going to continue to support it, but it just, I don't know why anybody wouldn't want that.
Right. Okay. Well, let's move into, if you can, talk about any of the major cases that you can talk about, and that kind of stuff. Obviously, we'll have to change the details and circumstances a little bit just to protect the integrity of the stories here. But is there any stories that you want to talk about, or anything cool that you've experienced or done during your time that you think the listeners might get a kick out of, or maybe try to learn something from?
I think that let me say this. When I got assigned to DEA, the squad I was in, it was like I was lucky to be there. That squad was made up of guys that had been in narcotics for 20 plus years and had done things that I couldn't even comprehend. And to sit there and learn from those guys, they were real deal. I mean, they were real deal narcs, man. They were doing the job back in the day when, I mean, you want to talk about doing some undercover and long-term undercover and all that kind of stuff. So I really feel like if we had a room of those guys, that would probably be the best podcast you've ever hear. I did get to do a lot of neat things. And it just depends on what y'all want to hear. But, um, you know, I remember kind of uniquely, I guess, for some guys, I remember when the whole super meth thing came in and, I had been at DEA for not long. Um, and I remember when the interdiction guy hit his first, he called me because we had a rule up there. What it used to be is a kilo or better. If it wasn't a kilo or better, it went to somebody else.
Right.
And so coming from here, it's like, man, how am I going to get a kilo, dude? Like I'm buying crack every day, dude.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, you got all these old heads in there that you already don't want to let down. And I'll throw it back to Randy Tooman, man. Full disclosure, we grew up together since the third grade. Like just we've always been best friends. So it's kind of unique. We grew up together, went to the same school together, worked narcotics together. And then when I went to DEA, he shortly came on after as a TFO. So in our same squad. So pretty unique. But I'm sitting there, you're thinking, man, I want to put something on the table for these guys. And I remember Randy called me. He was like, hey, man, I think I hit a load of 25. And I was like, these 25 bundles, false bottom of a toolbox. And it's coming from the valley or coming from Laredo. And I was like, oh, man. And back then you were still getting a bunch of weed and stuff like that. And he was like, dude, I think it's meth.
Nice.
And I was like, you're saying you got 25 kilos of meth? This is at the time when nobody really saw that. It was a big deal. Meth was so expensive.
Right.
The meth labs were kind of going away. But, I remember walking in the group supervisor's office. I was like, hey, I was still, didn't know the guys, barely knew him, was barely up there. I was the youngest guy
Right.
Assigned to the floor. So you walk in there and I was like, hey, boss, hey, one of the guys I know, he just got 25 kilos of meth. And he spun around. He was like, what? He's like, 20. He's like, walks out, gets all the squad. He's like, everybody. He called me, my name's Matt, but he called me Matty. Is his way where he's like, everybody go with Matty. Everybody get out there, and
That's awesome.
That kind of started it. And man, we did some basic things. Not all this stuff was, and when you work in a squad, sometimes you're the case agent or sometimes you just get called in to help. But we would do things like, and this is not unique. I will say this. I want to say this for disclosure. This is not, my stories are not unique to any narc assigned to that kind of unit in the United States would have these type of stories and or better, but yeah, for me, it was pretty cool. You would come in and by the end of the day, you'd be in New York or, guys are working, you'd be sitting there drinking coffee. And I think the unique thing, and this is what it goes back to say, like when it's working, when the squad's working or the initiative is working, it's pretty cool stuff. Like we'd come in and be drinking coffee. Now, remember, I came from where I'm buying crack every day, working the streets, driving car with no air conditioning where
Right.
the window won't roll up, some seized piece of crap, to having coffee and guys talking about, hey, man, I got this airplane case and I'm about to go to the Bahamas tomorrow because we're going to do a hard wire on an airplane, on a jet that's going to go here and do this. And you're just sitting there thinking, what the,
Yeah.
So it was a bunch of that kind of stuff. Got to work first couple of years I was at DEA. We did a lot of stuff at the border, which was unique for me. It was unique and different. And I really liked it. I liked McAllen, Brownsville, Laredo. We used to go down there and do a lot of controlled deliveries, pick up dope, bring it back. If somebody got caught at the checkpoint, let's say they were going to New York, again, this is just, everybody else could have these stories too, but, if they flipped them and said, hey, this is my 5th trip to New York, they don't really check on me, because as people know, organizations are different. If you're a new driver, you're not trusted. They're checking on you. They got a tracker in your car, but, say I'm going to, they don't really check on me. I know the guy, whatever. And so, yeah, I burned 4 or 5 hours sitting here, but I can make something up. If we go to New York, hey, I can turn you on to, I can deliver it for you. And before you know it, you're in a car. Somebody's driving a load car. There's 10 of y'all, in a convoy, and you're just trying to get up there. And it's like, hey, I have to take this car because they know this car. This car has the trap in it. So it's not a thing of where you can put the dope and fly it up there. So, we did that. There was guys I know back that I never got to do one of these, but they would put a vehicle on an airplane and fly it. If you needed to get some. I mean, how cool is that?
That's pretty cool.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
that's pretty awesome.
we had all kinds of stuff like that.
Man, that's awesome. Um, so from your time back doing your street level stuff, and you know, I guess we can talk a little bit about that. So, is there any particular buy or deal that you did back as a street level narc that kind of stands out in your mind that was either humorous or particularly dangerous or something weird happened from buying crack or buying like a small amount of stuff?
No, I think for me, and went like I said, went from just being a deputy to end up being a commander of a task force over my career. My career in narcotics, learned a lot, and I tell everybody, man, I did everything wrong in the beginning, and it's just because you really didn't have anybody to mentor you or train you, but I did everything wrong, and I look back to the things I was doing. I was like, oh my gosh, man, nobody knew where I was. Nobody,
Right.
nowadays you're briefing, you're doing this, you're doing that. You got eyes on, sometimes you have a helicopter in the sky or a plane in the sky watching you, all this stuff. I did everything wrong. I was out on my own buying dope. Nobody had a clue where I was. And,
Right.
it really dawned on me one time I was doing a hand to hand with a guy. And just the guy was just like, hey man, not in a aggressive way, but he was just like, hey man, you want to buy a gun? And you get that sometimes, and you're just like, yeah man, like what you got, most of the time it's like, hey, I got it at the house, or I'm gonna get it, or whatever. And I'd already bought the dope from him, and he had it in his lap, and he just like hands me a pistol, and I was
Nice.
just like, you know what? It's those. Luckily, it didn't end up bad for me, and I did buy the gun. Uh, but when you're learning, it just taught me so many lessons to be able to take to throughout my career. And like I said, now God, we do things so much different. But I'm sure there's a bunch of guys that are in the same position. You're just out there trying to make it happen. And really, from my street level days, the only thing I'll say is I think people underestimated how much dope was actually being sold in our areas and our communities because, previously the task force would kind of roll through and they would make some buys. And as some task forces do, I was never a fan of this. They would like work for 6, 8 months and then they would be like, hey, we're going to get an indictment list. And we're going to go back and we're going to get these 10 people. And to me, well, yeah, I get that. And there's a train of thought. And sometimes in your bigger cases, because you have so many defendants and you're going to do a federal case and it's going to be a conspiracy case, you have to work it like that. But on the street level side, I always thought, doesn't make any sense to me, man. Like, you're sitting here doing this. Them dudes are still selling dope for them
Right.
10 months.
Yeah, exactly.
So I was a fan of, hey, man, if it's a good house, I'm going to make 2 buys. I'm going to pull a search warrant, arrest warrant, and we're going to smash it. And that really, for me, we started doing warrant after warrant after warrant.
All right. So you were talking about, making mistakes and stuff in your early career and, doing undercover work and stuff. What was the biggest thing that kind of helped you get over that and get through that and get to where, you were, more proficient, more safe when it comes to doing this kind of stuff?
I think, and I use this for the SWAT thing too, but I think reps. You gotta get the reps. If you're not doing the reps, if you're not doing buys, if you're not doing search warrants, if you're not writing affidavits, then you're not going to ever perfect anything. And I think also too, you can't be scared to jump into some people are they get nervous about, oh my gosh, man, what about this or that? No, like you have to you got to just jump in with both feet and be like, you know what? It takes me a while to write a search warrant right now, but at this time in my life, I can just write one with my eyes closed.
Right.
And you can already, it's like patrol. It's like anything. The longer you do it, if you try to master that craft and it's never mastered, you're still learning all the time because the game changes. But I used to like that you would get to a point where you would be starting a case and you would already after the first buy already be planning out you can see the end game in sight because you've done so many of them. And I think that's a good place to get to in your career. And then you find new challenges. And also I say this to everybody, find somebody that does what you want to do really, really well and reach out to them and just ask them, what I
Yeah.
is, hey man, can I write, if this is your first go around and you're making buys and you really don't understand or just working narcotics and you kind of, you know what, you can go to all schools you want. You can go to 2-week schools and this and that, but no, get the guys that do it like for us, the closest HPD, but or Harris County, whatever, DPS. Just most of these people let you do a rotation. Get in
Right.
there and do a rotation and see how they do it, because them dudes are getting the reps everything. It's the same thing with SWAT. I think where people fail is that they get this idea of, hey man, this is my own little world. I do what I do. I don't want any outside resource. I don't want any, and what that is that's ego, and ego is going to get you hurt or killed, or unfortunately get somebody else hurt or killed. And it's like, no, sir. What you need to do is that you need to constantly be watching how the game changes. It changes, especially in the SWAT world, technology, this and that. And if you fall behind, you have to answer for that. So for me, yeah, we might run, like I said, 30 missions a year, which for us, that's busy, 25, 30. But, you look at some of these agencies that are running that in a, 2-month cycle
Right.
or whatever, get with them dudes, because them dudes are going to be able to line you out. They're going to be able to say, hey, man, let me tell you what doesn't work.
Right.
And it might be a tactic that you still have in your playbook. So I think that's super important.
That's awesome. All right, guys. Well, I appreciate y'all tuning into this episode of Texas Narcos Podcast. That's all for today. Make sure you tune in next week as we pick up with part 2 with Chief Deputy Matt Walls. All right, guys. Thank you for tuning into this episode of Texas Narcos Podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. Remember to hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, share our podcast with your friends and family. You can find Texas Narcos Podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and iHeartRadio. Your continued support helps us to bring you stories like the one you just heard. Thank you, God bless, and we'll see you down the road on Texas Narcos.